Russian trial balloon. Are the Russians seeking peace in Ukraine? Bloomberg reported this week that Russian President Vladimir Putin put out feelers to senior U.S. officials through indirect channels about seeking an end to the Ukraine war. This approaching to U.S. officials were reported to have occurred last month with no other details given. The U.S. administration and the Kremlin have both denied the story, but this would be expected because using indirect channels allows plausible deniability to both parties that the meeting ever happened. The question is whether the offer that is being reported is real or an attempt to sow discord among the countries supporting Ukraine. Bloomberg claims that the sources of their report are from two officials that have close ties to the Kremlin. The report stated that Russia would be willing to drop the demand for a neutral and non-aligned Ukraine, and that would eventually allow Ukraine NATO membership. These are two potentially significant concessions by the Russians to end the war. Ostensibly, Russia went to war over NATO's eastward expansion and the continually putting forward the idea of NATO membership offered to Ukraine. NATO membership aspirations are also codified in Ukraine law as a national goal. So the idea of agreeing to NATO membership for Ukraine would be Russia conceding one of its war aims. It also assumed that the dropping of non-aligned status demands would allow European Union membership to Ukraine. With the Kremlin offering two large concessions that would guarantee Ukraine's security, what do the Russians want in exchange? It is assumed that Russia would want to keep Ukraine territories that it annexed in both 2014 and 2022, mainly in the Donbass and the Crimea. Both of these have been rejected by Ukraine and by most of its Western partners as being negotiable. However, it would be the basis of offering large concessions on both sides to negotiate an end to the war. The U.S., Ukraine, and the West have been skeptical of Putin negotiating in good faith. So just like the days of the Cold War, there's a healthy and somewhat justified concerns of Russia's negotiations' credibility. The West is not much better when it comes to Ukraine because of the failure to meet the commitments of the Budapest Memorandum. There is healthy skepticism by all parties that any of the parties are acting in good faith, or at least are acting in their own interests. The question of good faith is that the Russians might be making an offer to create discord and distrust between the West and Ukraine. The idea of a backdoor channel existing between the U.S. and Russia to discuss Ukraine is a concern to the Ukraine government. With funding being delayed and upcoming election in 2024, the Ukrainians might be concerned that the U.S. and Russia will negotiate the fate of Ukraine. The other part of the good faith is that Kremlin is offering NATO membership knowing that there is at least two countries, Hungary and Slovakia, that have publicly stated that they would veto Ukraine NATO membership. That means the Russians are offering a concession that they are comfortable will not be unanimously supported by all NATO memberships. This can potentially be true of European Union membership as well. So it could be a gamble that Russia is making two big concessions that will, in the end, be vetoed by member states. This makes Russia look like a good faith partner, and the countries that veto NATO and EU membership are the bad partners, according to the Russian point of view. So it is plausible that the Kremlin is not negotiating in good faith because their concessions are subject to unanimous consent of two international bodies, but territorial concessions would not be subjected to the same. U.S. officials and experts have stated this is a Russian tactic to drive a wedge in the Ukraine coalition, though the believability of this statement is in question after U.S. officials went on record stating the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian plant and is an example of using the bureaucracy to support political goals, hurts the credibility of these organizations when their expertise is legitimately needed. It is possible that Ukraine is trying to use the offer of peace to weaken the coalition, especially after the failed Ukraine spring and summer offensive, would indicate that the Russians do not need to seek peace yet with their stronger battlefield position. As these distrusts are reasons not to open negotiations. If the officials negotiating for peace are open about the hurdles and their concerns and make them public, that would reduce the likelihood that a wedge could be placed on the alliance. It would also place Kremlin in the position that it could be exposed of not negotiating in good faith. The other concerns of unanimous consent of NATO and EU can be conditional for any peace, meaning Ukraine accession must occur before the treaty is ratified. The idea is that distrust and good faith can be made nearly inert by open dialogue, including to the public at large. If ending the war is the true aim of a peace in Ukraine, then the West should press the Kremlin on this issue to either expose the deceit or pursue a peace.